Art classes in high school are awesome. So many opportunities, so many projects, time with friends. It is fantastic. But now you're done. High school is over, and with it, compulsory education here in the US. So what now? Greetings. My name is Zach, and I spent a decade with students asking this exact same question upon finishing their high school tenure. You're an art student and you just finished high school, and whether you want to go into the arts as a profession or you just want to make sure they stay in your life, there is not a whole lot of guidance as to how to achieve these ends. In this episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about this period of indecision. And while it hits most people right after they finish school, it might hit you after college, after ending a career, or after deciding that art really is the correct direction for you. There are a lot of different components here, so if you are watching on YouTube, feel free to take a look at the timestamps to see if a particular section answers your questions or appeals to you. Alternatively, try listening to the whole thing. You may benefit from information intended for someone else. If you are enjoying these podcasts, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps out a ton. To start, let's take a look at the potential different positions you as an artist may be in during this time of indecision. And then following each, we will take a look at some strategies and potential solutions for the issues. Let's start with art careers. Your goal is to do this for a living, in some capacity. This is so many students when they finish high school. So many of the kids who were in my AP Studio art classes had some latent desire to do art for a living. In fact, when I was in high school, the same was true. Many of us that were in those high-level classes desired to do something with art for a living. The reality is, as we started to apply for colleges or think about what we were going to do after high school, probably 50% of us, by the time we finished high school, were already resigned to the fact that we weren't going to go into the professions. We weren't going to do art. This was a nice piece of our life when we were in high school, but it was relegated to high school and it wasn't going to continue to be a part of things. That is the reality for a lot of people, and that might be your reality. But if you are the person who decides, no, this is what I want to do, like I need to go into the arts, I need to do something with it, or I'm just going to slowly go insane, then the first thing I think you can do is to start researching. So research what particular area it is that you want to go into and figure out what is necessary for that profession. Now, a little bit later on in this section, I'm going to go over specifics just really quickly of a lot of different professions that exist and that you could potentially be going after. So I'm not going to do that right now with just little examples, but just know at the end of this section, I'm going to go over a whole bunch of quick, just shotgun style professions and specifics. But the big thing here is research. Whatever it is that you want to go into specifically, research it. Find out if people in your local area do it. Go talk to them, read online, find YouTube videos, research. Don't assume that you know. Don't assume that your art teacher knew. And this is coming from someone who was an art teacher. And I would sometimes have these meetings with parents and with students where they would go, well, my kid wants to do this. They want to go into graphic design. What should we do? And I would give them my information, and I would always try to give them large-scale caveats of, this is my information and my perspective based on what I learned when I was in college learning this. Things have changed. It's been a decade. It's been 15 years. And I'm also assuming that my knowledge was correct then. So research. And along with this research, look at the portfolios and the work of people who are in that particular industry. Again, we'll talk about some specifics later on, but just for example, if you are wanting to be a painter in your local painting market, it's pretty easy to go to the galleries and to go to the websites and check out and see what are these people producing, what are they putting out there. It's a little bit harder to check how things are selling, but you can go into a gallery, kind of mentally map things out. Most of them won't let you take photos, and then go back a couple weeks later and try to figure out what's left the gallery. And you can kind of safely assume that stuff that left the gallery was either pulled out by the artist or it was sold. Sometimes you can go onto an artist website. I've got a buddy who has a really good website, and I can go in and see which paintings have sold. He leaves up the photos of them. So look at the work of people in your intended area to see how your stuff compares. And online, look at portfolios. See what people are posting on their Instagram, see what people are posting on their websites, see what they're posting on their YouTube channels. And you can get a pretty good idea of how your work compares to their work, and if your work is bringing something that is a little different and stands out. Now, here's something that is less artistic specifically, but it's really important as you're starting to plan and think about your art career. What are the specifics for how much you want to make or need to make, and where do you want to live? And where can you tolerate living? It could be that in your local community, art sells well, and the cost of living isn't tremendously high. And so you don't need to make a ton to live in that area and exist and work as an artist. That's really important to know. If you come from a background or have the desire to live in a really high economy lifestyle, then that means that your art and your art career is going to have to yield higher economic results than someone else. Some of the people that I know in my personal life that have dedicated themselves to art as a full-time career are exceedingly frugal people. And so you don't need to make a ton of money each week or month or year if most of your expenses are taken care of and paid, if you have a house that's already paid off, if you don't buy new cars, if most of your art supplies are scavenged or recycled in some way. Those things are really important to know about you and yourself. And again, there's no shame if you want to live a life that has high economic drains, and that makes it sound negative, but there's no shame in desiring to have a high economic status. But you need to know that before you head in, because if you don't know that about yourself and you find out that it's going to take you 5 to 10 years to build up your art clientele to be able to get to that kind of point, you should just understand that prior to heading in and make sure you're ready for that. You're ready to be dedicated. And again, if you are not that type of person and you can really be frugal and you can cut corners and you can cook all your own meals, it means you don't have to make as much as an artist. And the other side of this is maybe you desire to be an artist so much that you're willing to sacrifice those other things. But that all kind of coalesces into this point. So consider the specifics of how much you want to make, need to make, where you have to live, where you can live. These are all important components here. If you want to do something in the fine arts realm, is there an active art community around you? This has to do with where you can live or should live. But if you live somewhere where there is no active painting community and you want to be a painter, that's going to hamper your progress. Maybe you'll be the lucky one who starts a new wave, but that's not usually how that goes. And when you're early on in your career or you're just looking to start your career, that's probably not where you want to find yourself. So look around and see if you're going to go into the fine arts, is there an active art community around you? Now, I live on the Front Range in Colorado, and the towns that are north of us in Fort Collins and then Boulder and Denver down south, there's active art communities in all of those. And the mountain towns actually have lots and lots of art galleries, especially this little town up in the mountains called Salida, which ironically back in the day had more art galleries than it did restaurants when I first discovered the town. So we have an active art community around here in Colorado, and if you were trying to go into the fine arts, you would probably be okay. Especially if it's more practical fine arts like ceramics. There's a huge ceramics community here and a large desire for it. So this is something that you have to be cognizant of, more particularly if you're going into the fine arts. A lot of the digital art stuff can be done online. But again, look into the company. Some companies may want you to move out to California or to New York or to Chicago, but not all of them will. These are things that are important to consider as you're starting to really look at what you want to do for your art career. Now, here's a tough one. Is your portfolio ready? How do you make a portfolio? You know, we go over a lot of these things in high school classes to some extent, but a lot of students finish out their high school art tenure with AP Studio Art. Is your AP Studio Art portfolio going to work as a professional portfolio? No, I don't think it will. The AP Studio Art portfolio, especially with how the program's changed in the last couple years, are really dedicated to a singular premise. They no longer require that you show the breadth of work that they did when I was in high school, or even the first couple years of running those classes. So you're going to have to devise a portfolio specifically for your professional work. Now, again, this is going to go back to looking at the people in your field and where they start at and having an understanding of that. And then you're going to have to be really objective when you look at your work. Is your portfolio ready? Let's assume for just a moment that your skills are in a decent enough spot. We'll touch on that next. But if your skills are in a decent enough spot, it's a matter of making sure that your portfolio is what you want it to be. This portfolio should be online. You should have a website. There are a lot of places that you can build a portfolio and you don't have to worry about all the hosting and everything. But you should have a digital portfolio that you can send people to really easily, probably through your email address. This is a grouping of work that should be representative of the specific job and career that you're going for. So if you work on a lot of different media, you might want to consider having different portfolios. If you're applying, for example, to a gallery and you want to have your ceramics work in there, you don't need to have your paintings and your drawings and other things in that specific portfolio as well. In a lot of cases, it's going to behoove you to have that ceramics portfolio be just your top 10 to 15 pieces of ceramic work. Multiple angles, good photos. It should look like you care about what you're doing. So take a look at your portfolio. If you don't have one, build one. It's a great exercise. I'm going to do another one here soon, and maybe that'll be a kind of a fun video to do, and discussion about me building my portfolio, because my work is widespread. If you watch my stuff on this channel, you'll notice that I do oil paintings, acrylic paintings, watercolor, gouache, ink, digital, pen. That's because in general, I am producing content for a variety of artists. I will at some point open channels that are very, very specific. And if I was going toward a gallery trying to get my oil paintings in, for example, I would not show them this channel. I wouldn't show them all my work. I would show them just my oil paintings and just probably the top 10 oil paintings that I've done, which for whatever reason would all be birds. So is your portfolio ready? If you need to have multiple portfolios, have them, build them online, make sure the photos are great. It should just, when you show someone, it should illustrate that you care about your work. You care about people understanding your work, and you care about people knowing you care about your work. So, is your portfolio ready? Good thing to put your time and energy into, and can honestly be encouraging sometimes because it'll spur you on to create some new works to fill out the gaps that might exist in that space. Now, as promised, are your skills high enough yet? Ugh. This is so tough to consider, but 100% worth considering. It's very difficult for us as artists most of the time to objectively compare ourselves with other people. And in this case, you have to do it. But what you have to do is you have to try to pull yourself out of it as much as you can and objectively look at your work versus other people who are in that field. So, don't think of yourself as the human being behind the art. Try to just look at the pieces. So if you go back to your earlier research on the work that people are doing that are already in your intended industry, and you look at a whole bunch of their pieces of work from various artists, and you look at all of your work that is in your portfolio that you've now put together, does your work feel like it stands out like a sore thumb? It doesn't have to be as good as the professionals who are already doing it. But if it looks like it's in a totally different realm, like it doesn't belong in any capacity, then your skills may not be high enough yet. Now, again, I think the biggest thing I can stress here is you have to be objective. If you can't find a way to be objective, you need to find other people in your life who can be. These can't be friends or family, unless your friends or family are professional artists and they have a tendency to be very, very, very harsh. But if you find professionals, if you find people that do this already, you can ask them. Is that an awkward conversation? Absolutely. But if you're going into the art profession, you're going to have a lot of awkward conversations. So try to objectively look at your work. And if you can't do that, try to find some professionals or people in your life who will shoot straight with you, who will tell you, you know, your backgrounds are not on par with these other people. But, you know, there's a good chance that you might be in a place where some of your work or a particular category of your work does compete. If you come to the conclusion that no, you aren't ready, your skills, your portfolio are not at the level that you need to be in order to crack into that industry, and again, you're being fair to yourself, here are some things that you can do to keep working on that same journey. Keep practicing. And in order to keep practicing, devise specific goals for your practice. If you'd like to, you can take a look at my video on artistic goals and how to build them and how to define them and what they look like. that will help you. I won't take too much time here, but the idea is have a specific destination in mind, and then from there you can break down individual goals to help you approach that in a much more direct manner. So make sure you have concrete understandings of what you desire, where it is you want to be. If you have a tendency to just jump into your work and work because it's fun, that's great. But there's going to be a lot of work that you're going to have to do if you're pursuing this as a career that isn't necessarily fun. You're going to have to focus on your areas of weakness. You're going to have to focus on your areas of strength and break down the little weak components in that. I certainly have areas of my own skill that are terribly unsatisfactory if I was going to try to go into any of the major professions at this moment. There are categories where I can do. I am capable of instructing. I am capable of teaching beginners. I am capable of oil painting at a reasonably high degree. But there are many, many, many more areas and facets that I would like to be able to work in that I don't have those skills yet. And I have spreadsheets, and I have lists, and I have notes of the exact areas that I want to focus on, the exact areas that I want to work on. These are my strategies to move forward in that, and they're also strategies to avoid hopelessness. But if you don't know where it is you want to go, if you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, you don't know what to work on. And you might end up just making tons of art, which is great, that isn't particularly pushing you toward the goal that you are trying to obtain. Also, hold yourself accountable. This is going to look different for every human. This is something that you have to figure out as an individual regardless. When you are out of your home and you're figuring out how to be an adult, you've got to figure out how to pay bills on time. You got to figure out how to feed yourself. You got to figure out how to wake up when you need to. These are all just basic life things about accountability. And you're going to have to figure out how to hold yourself accountable for your art and making it. And if you really want to do it, you'll find a strategy. You'll find ways to do this. And I'm sure there's a load of other videos and podcasts and content on how to do that. For me, I keep people in my life aware of what I'm doing, and so I basically set myself up for embarrassment if I haven't worked on anything in the last couple weeks, and I talk to somebody and they're like, so, like, how's the art going? And you're like, crap, it's not. And so I want to avoid those situations. I also want to just taste the success. I love documenting things I've done and being able to look back in sketchbooks and go, man, like, I've really improved. I can do this now. I couldn't draw figures this way, and now I can. Then I also, will accidentally take too much time off of things and backpedal. But again, having specific goals avoids that as well. I have too many loves, too many things I want to do. And so if I don't focus, then I end up losing skills. And so you've heard me talk about it before, but the biggest area to focus on with drawing, painting, and anything from imagination is just understanding three-dimensional form. But hold yourself accountable, figure out strategies for that. Another thing here is look into taking classes locally or online that help in your specific pursuits. Part of this is in addition to the accountability and in conjunction with that, because if you pay money for a class and there's other people in that class who will miss you if you're not there, that can help with the accountability. I hate wasting time. I hate wasting money. So if I paid $60 for a class, I'm going to go to that class. I'm going to show up online. I'm going to participate. I'm going to try to do all the work and the homework for it because I want to make sure I got my money's worth. So sometimes that can be a really beneficial thing to do. You also will sometimes make community. You'll find yourself in communities in each of those areas, and that can be super beneficial as well. Okay, now we're going to shift gears and examine things a little more closely. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of specific areas. So if you are just looking to skip ahead, don't feel bad about it. Look at the timestamps and jump ahead. I'm going to go through a bunch of potential areas that you could be looking into. If I don't cover the one you're looking for, please let me know in the comments. If there's enough of them, we can do that in a next video. But also, if you have feedback or comments of your own about how to handle any of these, please add them. It would be beneficial to anybody else who's watching this or reading. So, fine art painter. Okay, so if you are a fine art painter, go to galleries. Go see what local people are doing. Check out their prices. Check out if oil or acrylic or watercolor or gouache are all selling, or if only oil is selling. You'll hear a lot of old school painters talk about how oil paint is the premier painting medium, and to some degree it's true. It's hard to ascertain if it's true just because it's true. or if there's actually something better about the medium. Now, oil paint is an older school medium, so it tends to get a little bit more prestige. But go to galleries, see what people are producing, see what kind of paintings are selling in your area, whether it's mostly landscapes, whether it's portraiture, whether it's cityscapes, if it's largely abstract or surrealistic. All of these are just points of interest and input for you on figuring out what things look like. Are the works framed? Are they not framed? How many artists are in each of the galleries? Are the painters in the galleries showing 10 pieces, 15, 20 pieces? Are painters generally focused on a single thing? This might help you if every painter that's in the gallery that you are really excited to be in, this painter only has landscape work, this painter only has portraiture, this painter only has surrealistic work. That might mean that that's how your portfolio needs to be tailored specifically for that gallery in order to get in there. Take a look at what the galleries take as far as commission. A lot of galleries take 50%, or they take half of what you make there. So that can be something to consider as well. If you want to do things as a painter, you can also look into teaching local painting classes, because there's a lot of people that want to do just little fun things, especially around the holidays. And a lot around here in Colorado, at least, there's been a lot of the like wine and painting classes, which I have no interest in doing or teaching, but there's a lot of people who do those, and people get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So those are kind of some specific things to look into if you're a fine art painter and you're thinking about making a career of that. Again, like I'm going to say probably for every single one of this, find painters, find local painters who aren't jerks and who don't see you as a young up-and-coming artist as competition, but they see you as a friend and a community member, and see what they do and what their strategies are and what they recommend. But those are some good things to look into as a painter. Fine art photographer. This is a harder one, but if you are looking to get into photography and you want to do all the same things that you would do as a painter. You want to look into the galleries and see what kind of work is showing, how it's priced, all those things. A couple recommendations, though, for photographer is look into doing wedding photography, because wedding photography, it's always going to be present. People are always going to need it. It's expensive, it's demanding, and it's in demand. And it pays decently well if you're good at doing it. So that's something to consider there as well. If you are a photographer, it's also good to be prepared to handle people throwing comments at you about how painting is more of an artistic medium than photography is, which isn't true, but you'll need to be prepared for that and be able to handle that. I don't have a lot of people in my life that are professional photographers. Usually if they are artistically, they're also doing things like wedding photography, or they're doing documentation photography for things. They're doing senior photos. So those are things that you can look into in that regard as well. That could potentially be other places where you're like, I'm a working professional photographer. I have my work in galleries. I sell work online. I also have kind of these businesses where I do wedding photography, senior photos, Christmas cards, things like that. Ooh, a lot of these to go over. Ceramicist. So if you are a ceramicist, same things as the painter applies. Go to galleries, take a look online, take a look at any of the Potter's Guild around you. There is a Potter's Guild in a lot of places. So look online and figure out what they do, if there's any rules, if there's conventions and things that they do there. See what things are priced at, see what's selling. And in a lot of cases, ceramics work is practical. You're making mugs and bowls and plates and things like that. And the nice part about that is that those things will always be relevant. They will always be prevalent, and people are willing to pay for them. Now, people are often hesitant to pay as much for a mug as they would for a painting because the mug is practical and usable. And that's where ceramics would diverge from sculpture, where sculpture is predominantly not useful. It is just art in a pure sense. Ceramicists, it's more a matter of how do you get people to pay what it costs to make the work when they could go to Walmart and buy a cup or a mug for a couple dollars and yours is $40 or $50 or $60. But again, some of that's just making it interesting, seeing what sells, seeing if people in your local community are interested in buying those things. For me personally, the majority of the art I buy is ceramics because ceramics is very difficult for me. It's one that I can't do. And so I've got a lot of respect for ceramicists. And it's also practical. Like, it's nicer to drink out of a handmade mug than it is to drink out of a, mass-produced mug. And it's a simple pleasure that I get to hold on to. And so ceramicists. If you're a sculptor, which I mentioned briefly, that's hard. That's hard. That's like painters, but on steroids. So I don't have a lot to add as far as sculpture goes. If you have a video or anyone you can recommend on, helping young kids who are graduating high school or college and want to go into sculpture as a profession to relate to them, please do so, because I just don't have a lot of information in that particular area. Okay, what about a tattoo artist? I have a lot of friends that in college with me that were drawing majors, and I always felt that that was a terribly impractical major, but a lot of them were actually going into tattoo artistry, which makes a lot of sense. You're going to go learn and get all the skills that you need to draw and to draft to make tattoos. So if you want to go into tattooing, practice your drawing, make sure your drawing portfolio is excellent, make sure that the work that you're working on is also relevant for tattoo work, and then go find tattoo artists and apprentice yourself to them. That seems to be really the most practical way. I've got good friends that are tattoo artists. If you want to learn how to do it, go find someone who does it and just beg them to teach you how to do it. It might take a while. You're probably going to have to present your portfolio. You're probably going to have to sit in that studio and do a lot of tasks that are not fun, and just be patient and wait. And honestly, like, your patience will be rewarded. If you end up being a tattoo artist, you have the gift and privilege of putting things permanently on human bodies. It's an amazing responsibility, and it's a gift. People are trusting you with a piece of themselves, with a piece of their humanity. And it's a really lovely, wonderful thing. So if that's what you want to do, find good local artists, talk to them. Again, try to find some that aren't competitive with you. Try to find some that will take you under their wing and will teach you how to do it, and work harder than everyone else, because there's a lot of people who try to apprentice for things and they want the easy route. Don't do that. If you really want to do it, if this is what you feel like your calling is and you're dedicated to it, put in the time, put in the work. That industry needs people who are going to hang out in it for 20 or 30 years, who are kind and compassionate, and who will help people get these things emblazoned on their bodies. Also, just as a side note, if you decide to go into tattoo artistry, make sure that you've got some pretty good people skills. If you have a big heart for people, if you're very empathetic, if you're kind-natured, if you like listening to people, if people come to you with their problems, these are all bonuses. Because you're sitting there for hours on end with a person, often putting something on their body that has significant meaning to them, and you're going to hear their stories and you're going to talk to them. And a lot of tattoo artists end up as pseudo-therapists and pseudo-counselors for their clients. And it's this really kind of cool, beautiful, strange punk rock world. And if that's you, then kudos, because it's cool. I've got a really good friend who's a professional tattoo artist and has been for ages. And although I still don't have any because I am just a very, very cautious individual, I will at some point. I fear that once I start, I won't stop, and then, we'll see where that goes. All right, graphic design. So if you want to be a graphic designer, you're going to have to kind of dissect which way you want to go with it. A lot of graphic design work nowadays is primarily done in the corporate level, where you're just going to go to a company's website and you're going to notice that they have a graphic design position open and you are going to apply. So if you are doing that, make sure that your work aligns with the work that you see on their website. So check out these corporate, these offices and their websites and what all of their graphic design looks like. A lot of it's layout. A lot of it involves text. The vast majority of it involves text. You're probably not going to get into a position early on in your career where you're designing logos for large companies. Like, people who've been doing it for ages and who have a lot of experience and make lots of money are the ones who are going to get those things most of the time. So if you're going for kind of a corporate graphic design position, this is one of the few times where a degree might be beneficial to you, but a portfolio will also be way more beneficial. If you can show that you've done work that looks like the work that they're demanding, then you'll probably be okay and you'll have a good chance of getting in and getting the interview. Now, if you want to do more like graphic design work locally, then you could end up doing a lot more logo things. The big thing there is just make sure that you understand what graphic design in your area costs, because there's a lot of people who will, sketch out something on a napkin for you and go, hey, can you just draw this up in Illustrator for me? It'll take you like 20 or 30 minutes. And so then they're like, well, I'll pay you $25 for it. So just be really clear and conscientious of your services and what you charge. And especially if you're doing this in like a freelance setting. Remember, as an artist, for all of these things, people are not paying you for the time that you put in. They're paying you for your expertise that took ages and years and blood and sweat and tears in order to build. So if it took you half an hour to build that logo because the sketch just so happened to be good at the beginning, it's your 5 to 10 years of drawing, logo design, and graphic design experience that allowed you to do that. So it's not a $25 job. So be aware of what your local economy is for these things. And if you're working locally, you probably don't need the degree. But if you're going into graphic design, my guess would be you're probably going to be working for a large business, and it's going to be mostly text and layout. Every once in a while, you're going to get to do website redesigns, or you're going to get to do a logo redesign, and those things are cool. Or if the company launches a new product, you'll have the ability to do those things. So just make sure your portfolio is geared for that. Make sure that you work quickly. Make sure you understand what people are working on in your local industries, or whatever the industries are that you're applying for, and that you... It's just such a wide field. The reason that I'm being more amorphous with this is graphic design spans so many different things that you really just don't want to be embarrassed. You want to know exactly what you're applying for when you apply for a job. You don't want to show a whole bunch of logo designs to a company that does all layout things for, the insurance profession. You want to make sure that your work and your portfolio lines up. And if you have not been building your portfolio and your resume for any jobs you're applying for, specifically for those jobs, that's the number one thing I would start doing. If you tailor your resume specifically for the job, if you tailor your portfolio specifically for the job, you just increased your chances of getting an interview, and therefore having an opportunity to get the job by, 2 or 3 times. It's remarkable the difference that makes. Architectural draftsman. So if you want to be an architect and you want to either make designs and buildings schematics for local businesses or local contractors, the nice part about this is that you're probably going to need a certification of some kind. So your local community colleges or universities are going to have programs that are going to help you kind of sort through all these pieces. This is a different profession than all the others we've talked about so far, and maybe even shouldn't be in this list, but I just wanted to mention it briefly. The nice part is that these organizations will help you with the licensure process, and you'll kind of be able to work through that. Again, approach local architects and get an understanding of what the work looks like and how to approach it. Concept artist. So this is many of us have this as like the secret back burner desire of what we want to do and what we want to be when we finally grow up, if any of us ever grow up. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because there are people on this platform who do a far better job of it than me because they are concept artists. My profession was an art teacher for a long time, and I've worked in the local communities. So if you want to understand what you need to do to get into concept art, I would really point you in the direction of Mark Brené or Trent Kaniga, and I will link both of them down below. They're fantastic. Yes, they've shown up in my podcasts and in my videos before. There's good reason for that. They both work in the professions, and they both have a really good understanding of what skills you'll need. The biggest thing is going to be your portfolio and making sure that your portfolio is targeted specifically toward the kind of company and the kind of work that you want to be working on. But other than that, I would refer you to Trent and Mark. They can help you tremendously. All right, the last of these quick ones that didn't end up so quick. Art teacher. If you have decided that you want to be an art teacher in elementary, middle, or high school, which is the vast majority of the positions, you're in luck because this one, in almost all regards, requires a degree and a certification. If you're in the United States, which is all that I can talk to, you will need to go get a teaching degree and a teaching license that comes adjacent to that. The nice part about it is as with a lot of, or unlike a lot of art degrees where the art degree isn't particularly beneficial, an art education degree is tremendously beneficial if you become an art teacher, because they're going to go through a lot of childhood psychology. They're going to teach you how to build curriculum. They're going to help you understand just a broad scope of all of the artistic media. So if you want to be an art teacher, my recommendation would be find a good local college or university that offers classes in early childhood education and in art education specifically, and I would go do that. The university that I went to, I managed to get an art education degree, and I got a bachelor's in fine arts and graphic design. That was not necessary. I could have been an art teacher with just the art education degree, but I wanted to have the focus on a particular medium. I wanted to take the extra time to be in the studio, to learn my craft better, and basically just to be a higher level artist and a little bit more professional when I was going into things. So if you want to be an art teacher, my recommendation is find a school that has a good art education program, which will usually be adjacent to just good education programs in general, and go there, get the degree, do your student teaching, get into the classroom, and from there you've got all the bits and pieces that you need in order to go into that profession specifically. I feel a little weird because it's what I did, and so my information seems way more direct, but part of the reason that I went that route is because it is more direct. It's a little bit more simple because you want to do this, you need this specific thing. You need this degree and you need this certification. You need a teaching license to be able to do this. So that's the route I go if art education is what you desire to pursue. For some of us, it is very difficult to discern what we ought to do or where we ought to go. It's easy to get overwhelmed with the prospects of pursuing art as a career, and our culture doesn't make it much easier on us. There's a lot of pressure to put your art on the back burner and work a real job. So the last thing that I want to talk about here is, what if your pursuit for the future is unknown or you're overwhelmed? Well, take some time. You just finished a lot of work and potentially a hard period in your life. If you just finished high school, you just finished compulsory education in the United States. You just finished the time period where you've been in school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, where everything was dictated for you and you had mild decisions that you got to make about your daily life. Now you get to make all the decisions, and that is overwhelming. Tremendously overwhelming. So take some time. It doesn't mean take years. It might mean a couple weeks. It might mean a couple months. But take some time. Focus on what you just finished. If you need to mourn the loss of what you finished, mourn. We all deal with those kinds of things differently. We all deal with loss differently. So process. Consider what you want, what you are good at, and what your personal needs are. There is no shame in taking a moment to draw up a plan, to consider what your life ought to be moving forward. Sometimes you have to work at a grocery store or a local restaurant for a while to pay the bills while you figure out what you want to do, where you want to go, and what's going to be necessary to get you there. Regardless of these things, how unknown the future is or how little you have made of a decision, if you're listening to this and art is valuable to you, here are a couple things that can help you through that unknown or overwhelming time. Stay in the medium. Keep making things. And don't demand too much of yourself. If you're still listening to this content, then art matters to you. And you still would like to at least consider the possibility of doing something with this professionally in your life. So stay in it. Keep drawing, or painting, or sculpting, or whatever it is that you do. You don't maybe need to do it with the same fervor and presence that you were doing while you were in school or while you were in that last period of your life, but don't run away from it. Especially if you feel overwhelmed, it can be so easy and so human to just push things away, dive into some video games or books, and just forget all of the hard work. And that's one of the worst things you can do. So stay in your medium. Or get a new sketchbook and just journal in there and put in some time daily. Find some artists you admire and follow them and stay engaged with their work. If you find them online or on Instagram or YouTube or something, just stay up on what they're doing. It'll keep your mind in that headspace of creativity and imagination, and it'll make it easier for you to re-engage in it when you come to that point later on. This is just an important thing too, as we all seem to draw a high level of inspiration from other artists. And so if you're looking at their work daily and you can do that without being overwhelmed and feeling like you don't compare to them, then it's going to be a beneficial thing. I find that most of us run into this. We all simultaneously over-compare ourselves with other artists and feel bad about our progress, and get excited about other artists' work and get inspired by it. So it's about making sure that you keep your head in the right space and that you are benefiting instead of, I want to say detrimenting, but that's not how that would work. But just make sure that it's a benefit and not a detriment to you when you're making those comparisons. And while you make your decision about your future, just assume that art will be a part of it in some regard. And don't leave it by the wayside. You'll be grateful that you did. If you end up going an artistic direction, then you've had a head start. You've stayed in it. You've continued to work. And if you decide that you're not going to pursue art as a career or as an integral component of your life, then you've just had some relaxing and engaging time that was dedicated to art. It's still a win. There's no deficit for you. So if this is overwhelming, if this time period in your life, wherever it is, whether you just finished high school, whether you finished college, whether you finished a career, and you're considering something artistically, I hear you, I feel you. It's a tough place to be. And I can't really tell you in good faith, don't be overwhelmed. It'll all be okay. It's tough, and it's going to feel overwhelming for a while. And that's okay. There's no shame in your feeling overwhelmed. So take some time, stay in your art, keep moving, and when it feels like it's not so daunting or overwhelming, or you've managed to make some decisions about direction, you can go back to some of the other things that we talked about. I hope this information has been helpful and illuminating. I wanted to spend more time talking about those of you who just want to keep art in your life as a hobby, but this podcast would just become far too large. So my next episode will be on that specifically, on how to keep art in your life and how to have it as a successful hobby. Specifically tailored towards those of you who are art students in whatever capacity, but have decided that it's not a career option for you, at least at this point, because it's still a lovely, beneficial, wonderful thing to keep in your life. So stay tuned for that one. That should be the next podcast that's coming out in this series. So as always, thank you for tuning in. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.